Because what we've done is we've pedestalized women and saying,
Yeah.
oh, they're the emotional ones. They can hold all the charge. They're the ones who are sensitive. No, 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 no. We are equally as fucking emotional and equally as sensitive. We've just been conditioned out of it. So now we have women who say, like, but I'm naturally able to hold a man in the depth of his emotion. And I'm like, bullshit, you are. You're still playing manipulative princess games or thinking you're a goddess because you went to a workshop. Have you gone to therapy? Have you untangled yourself from your shadow with the masculine? Right? That's the level we need to be playing at. Women need to do their work, men need to do our work, then we need to come together and do our combined work.
Thank you, bro. How are you? Good to see you again. It's been 2 years. Last podcast we did was
Wow.
August 2020. Sorry,
Wow.
2022. 2022.
Okay.
Yeah, man. I was re-listening to our episode actually, and like the old me, so much wisdom. I was like learning a lot, not just from you, but from me as well. I was full of
It's
energy.
the beauty of having a podcast, right?
Yeah, you're just like, oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, bro. So what's been going on in those 2 years then? Enlighten us, like fill
Oh
us in.
Lord.
I can give you a little of a because I've freshly listened. There was some moments because the book had been out 3 years. You had just your first free gathering happened, and
Mm,
then you had an initiation on the back of that, and
yeah.
you had 15 groups in other countries or over the world.
Okay.
Yeah, around the world.
What's happened, Chris? We have started a nonprofit. We're up to 45 teams all over the world. I've written another book
Mm.
and built out a huge team. Um, it's just grown and grown and grown and deepened and deepened and deepened. So the work that we're doing has just gone deeper and deeper in this magical, beautiful way. Obviously, as men who've been in the program for a couple years and are saying, "Hey, I've got my basic needs met. I understand relationship. I know how to make money. I know how to change my body. Now I'm really curious who I am and what else is out there for me. What else am I supposed to be doing?" And that's also coincided. I'm not sure if this had happened yet, but as a business, we had a huge loss. We had one of our key people commit suicide. And that was just a massive blow emotionally, personally, business wise. Like I never would have anticipated that. If you say like, hey, what are your future business challenges going to be?
Yeah.
I didn't think it would be that. And how real that was for us and the team. Um, and I don't want this to be depressing, but my cousin, a male my age with two kids, a year ago, same thing, committed suicide. And so it really focused us from, we had to step away from a bit of the like rah rah, let's get men to go fuck shit up, like build your dream life, the world is yours, to, hey, what's really going on with you?
Mm.
What help do you need? What support are you not asking for? How do we give you options for rock bottom and still hold on to the idea that there's a lot of men who come to us and are in the program and are part of our world because they're doing great and they
Mm.
want to do better and they want to ask the existential questions. They want to get in touch with their hearts and souls. So it really expanded the direction that we've gone to almost we I have a program now with Dewey Freeman of training therapists on how to work with men.
Mm.
And that was a huge shift for us. Like, again, 5 years ago, when I was sketching this out in a book and it was the pussy is the portal and your cock is medicine, I didn't think I'd be sitting in a room full of seasoned therapists and saying, hey, I'm about to spend a weekend teaching you how to best work with men. I didn't think that would be anywhere on my radar. So it's matured, Chris. Like I've
Mm,
matured. The business has matured. I've gone through real shit. My father just passed. There's
mm,
like adult things have happened. The pandemic happened, right? People are hurting. So I know that's a long answer to a short question, but because the long answer is everything's changed exponentially. And the core idea of the movement of let's help men live better lives. Let's help men end their suffering. Let's change relationship. Let's shift consciousness has stayed the same.
mm,
And then most recently, and I'm still not quite sure how to navigate this, we've opened up the movement to women because we had so many women approaching us for years, and this was going on for years of saying, "Hey, I don't really buy into the women's group is a goddess movement where I need to sit around in lingerie and cry and take bubble baths and just process my deep feelings. Like I want to go out there and live a kick-ass life too. And I want to be soft and I want to be in my feminine and I want a great relationship. I can't find an avenue for that. Is that something that would be available with you guys?" And for years we said no, because we really want to build this core entity and have it solidity and really, really understand men. And in the last 2 months, I just had this feeling. I was like, God, I can't keep doing this. We can't keep turning the knocks on the door away, because I also have so many men who have gone through the program and gone through the programs who now are in relationship and say, hey, this tide has kind of shifted. I came to you because women in my life were telling me I needed to do the work. I've done the work, and now I want to find women who have also done the work.
mm.
And are the healing, as we know, the real healing will be relational, and it'll come when when we're both in the same room. So,
Yeah.
man, like what hasn't changed is, like my hairline hasn't gotten any better. I think that's about the only constant in my life right now. Yeah, a
Yeah,
lot's
bro.
changed.
Yeah,
A
I
lot.
just want to reflect that back. I mean, I'd love to circle back to the unity work, to the relational, to the those
Yeah.
dynamics, because I think it's poignant over here in the UK as well. You're seeing that
Yeah.
more, and it feels like a natural progression now.
Yeah.
Men's work, men's organizations of so many, and it's beautiful to see. But the natural progression is to integrate that. But just on the business, let's dive into that a little bit because of course, with any
Sure.
business, there's going to be things you need to work on and work through, and it grows and it deepens. And as you grow and deepen, it's going to do the
Mhm.
same. Now, I'd love to know, like, prayers to the family and friends and everyone involved with the losses. But what do you think you as an organization was not seeing? You kind of touched upon it, but like, what were the things that you then tightened up and just maybe there was a pool of group of men that you just weren't able to access until those incidents and then something shifted.
Yeah, it's a question I've obsessed over, obviously.
Mm,
Um, and the only grace I've found with it is oftentimes it is the people who are the closest to you that you miss or who can't access the resource or whatever it is, right? I had talked to the woman who took her life. I talked to her 48 hours before and asked, "Hey, how are you doing?"
mm,
Like had an honest conversation, said, "I'm doing great. Like things are good." And they weren't. And then with my cousin, um, I don't know if it's just because it's family or there was a different reason for him going. Uh, that like all of my work was available. My number was in his phone. Um, what it shifted for us business wise though was my old building statement, right? I just got chills. Was I'm building a movement of a million men who express their masculinity through the primal and divine. I've said that 10,000 times, 10,000 places. And it was maybe a year ago that someone said to me, I still don't really understand what you do or why you do it. And it was someone kind of close to me. And I was like, man, you know
wow.
how much money I paid to learn how to say that one sentence? Like, this is how can you not know what we do? And I was
Mm,
talking and talking and talking and kind of explaining the programs and blah, 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 blah. And finally just put my head in my hands and said, I want to end the unnecessary suffering in men so that we end the suffering caused by men. And he goes, okay, I totally get why you're doing this. I totally get what you're doing. And so perhaps the shift towards languaging and programming specifically to say to men, hey, I know you're suffering. It's not acknowledged. You don't have permission to suffer. You think no one cares that you're suffering. All of the focus is on the suffering that you cause, but none of it's on the suffering that you carry. Let me just speak to that quickly. I get the book's aggressive and there's a gorilla on the cover and I use the word fuck a lot. But what if we actually shift the conversation away from, I need you to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and go kick ass, to let me sit down next to you on rock bottom and put my arm around you and say, I've been there. I get that. I get your suffering. There's a place for you here. There's a place for your pain, which that existed before, Chris, but I don't think
Yeah.
it was the emphasis,
Yeah, as
right?
soon as you said it, I'm like, I've felt that since, I just feel like that is the core thread, but it can be missed if the
Yeah,
language doesn't like fundamentally speak to that often. And that's maybe like the divine, it's quite a high
for sure.
goal, and the
Right, right,
primal
right.
might get lost in many different
Yeah.
ways.
It was even to the point, brother, where maybe 3, 4 months ago, I sat down with my team and said, hey, by the way, we also need to remember the primal. Like, we're not a therapy organization. We're
Yeah,
not just a mental health organization. Like, don't forget that a lot of men suffer
yeah.
because they're okay, but they don't know what to do now. They don't know what to do now that they've gone to therapy for 2 years and they're not walking around with trauma and they've quit drinking and they've quit smoking pot and they're not jerking off to porn and their businesses are doing okay, but they don't
Mm,
have permission to thrive and they don't have models and helps to get them from that place to a higher place. And that suffering may not be as problematic, right? They're not going to go shoot up a school or hang themselves over it, but they're still suffering. And that suffering will either need to be alchemized and released, or it will be numbed, sidestepped. It'll come out sideways. Like, it will create its own issues. So let's make sure that we're also addressing both, like, the full spectrum of the male experience.
yeah.
And that's been super helpful, right? We've grown a lot since then. So we feel like, the pandemic happened to us too, and we had to shift the way we did things, and we stopped having live groups because people couldn't get together, and we did focus more on mental health, and nobody was thriving, or not anybody healthy. And then we come out of that and people are still suffering, and then it's been a little bit of time, and now I feel like it's people like, yeah, I do want to get back out there, I do want to get back in shape. Now I put on some weight, I'm not suicidal, but I'm not thriving. And I want men in every stage of their lives, in every stage of development, to have the support they need, whether that's like, I'm hanging by a thread here on rock bottom, or I made $1 million last year and I want to know how to make 10. I want to be able to be there with them through all of that.
Yeah, it's full spectrum, isn't it? And that's the hardest path is to cater. But that's if you want to end suffering, it's like maybe that person is suffering with 1 million and his problems are just as valid as someone with nothing. And it's
100%.
catering with the big team and organization that you have to all men. That's a big
Yeah.
mission. That's a big mission. And this
Yeah,
coming from
man.
a man that did like his privacy at one point.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. And I've gotten more and more comfortable with my role. For a
Mm,
year, my role was terrible. It was just like a CEO. It was numbers and graphs and charts and back end work and marketing and writing copy. I missed being in front of people. I missed teaching. I missed standing in front of a room full of donors and sharing the mission of Uncivilized and telling stories. So I've also personally grown into just a different way of navigating this whole journey, right? It wasn't what I thought I'd be doing. And yet I'll just continue and continue to surrender to whatever it asks of me.
mm. What do you think one thing is that people come to you for that they can't get elsewhere? What do you think? Is there like a common thread that's like, yeah, no one else is speaking to this? And if you can't think of one, I've definitely got something that I recognize.
Yeah, I think it's because we're real.
Hmm.
And I don't know how else to say it. Like, I'm not different if you meet me in the street. I know a lot of men's coaches and men's influencers who are spray tanned and on steroids and standing in front of a Lamborghini, or screaming at the camera, and you find out that they're actually really quiet, peaceful guys. Like, this is, if you go have a kombucha with me, this is who you get. If you go to jujitsu with me, this is who you get. If we're in the surf lineup, this is who you get. If I'm at a 1,000-person event, this is who you get. And organizationally, we're meeting men where they're at and saying, "Hey, I see all sides of you. I get your suffering. And guess what? We're not going to coddle you. Like, we're going to put our big fucking strong arms around you and hold you tight and then pick you up and dust you off and be like, let's get going here." So I think the thread that we hear from men is like, you guys are real.
Hmm.
You're open about your struggles. You're open about your own challenges. You're open about the growth. You're open about, and you're not characters. And I don't want to hang out with a character.
Yeah. Do people still like given that, and I 100% would agree and trust that, but do people still meet you and they've projected someone infallible, someone
Of course.
inferior, and
Probably. I mean, I think it's a bit less now. Like, I remember 3 or 4 years ago, I had a
mm,
coaching client, and at the end of a call, I was like, "Hey, here's what I do when I have a bad day." Right. And he called me back maybe a half an hour later. I was like, can I ask you a really personal question? And I was like, yeah. He goes, you said something on the call. Like, you still have bad days? And I was like, brother, my employee just killed herself. Like, I have challenges with my girlfriend. My car broke down. I have to figure out how I'm going to make payroll next month. I'm not a some kind of deity, or I'm a human. I would get guys who would reach out, like fill out a form, and I'd call them. They're like, I can't believe that you actually make your own phone calls. I'm like, what do you think I do all day? Like, just levitate and count money, and like, I'm not Dan Bilzerian. Like, I work. I'm a human. I'm a dude. I go to jujitsu. I struggle because I just got beaten up by a lower rank who's way more athletic than me because he's in his 30s.
he's
Like,
got hair.
he's got hair. Like, I get stuck in traffic. Like, my internet goes out in the middle of, like, I'm human. I'm still fucking human.
Mm,
And I hope that I never get to a point where I don't want to answer my own phone, or shake hands with someone, or like, talk with someone after an event. Uh, that's what started all of this, Chris, was getting on the phone, being ground level with guys, showing up at events and being like, "Hey, I'm not better than you by any means, but this is what I've done that's worked for me, and I want to share it with you. Take it or leave it." I think some of that messaging too, of like, "Hey, take this or leave it." It's not like we don't have the answers. I don't know what's going to work for every guy. There are other organizations that are way better fits for other guys than we are.
yeah.
But I just say, "Hey, here's what I've been through. Here's how I got through it. Give it a try. Let me know what you think." You know? And
Mm,
and continually coming back to, how do I serve? Right? Like, I'm going to make money. The organization does great. We have a nonprofit. We're not as worried about, like, all revenue. I don't need my face plastered all over everything. I want to help people. And I believe that gets felt, right? It's a service oriented mission. I'm not doing $150,000 masterminds for billionaire tech guys. It's $30 to be in my world. Like, that's how it works.
mhm. Yeah. On the real, because it's a it's a beautiful thread. Two things I don't see talked about enough in men's groups, and it's sex and it's money.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like you go out of your way to speak about them because they are such core threads um into our way of being and our wounds, my wounds. Um,
100%.
why don't you feel like is there anything you do taper back as well? Is there any like do you really be careful about the language around? Oh, clearly not, because you say fuck a lot, but it's do you like really have to, because people have to be ready for it as well, and it has to be uh, you have to recognize the cultural milieu that we're in, and the where we're at and what people are ready for. I feel like there's a conversation there. Do you ever kind of play with that and just are mindful in that approach of how to speak to money and things like that?
Yeah, for sure. Especially, I'd say more so around sex, right?
Mm,
It is the most loaded topic, and people come into the idea of it in very different doorways.
mm,
And so it's no good for me to speak about the highest potentials of sacred sexuality with a guy who literally just can't get a first date because he doesn't understand basic social dynamics. He has no drive. He doesn't understand personal hygiene. He's looked at porn 7 hours a day for the past 2 years. I'm gonna miss him if I say like, "Hey, do you realize that you can actually get closer to God through sex?" Gonna be like, "Bro, just I don't even get this." And if I'm talking to a group of people who have that level of awakening, understanding, awareness, but still have a shadow with it, I don't want to be promoting sex as a means to God until you've worked through your shit. So you're not manipulating women. So yeah, I'm just more a bit culturally careful now. I think because I'm a bit more mature and older, and I do care. I do understand after 5 years of women DMing me saying, "Why do you use the word fuck so much? It's so crass. Why don't you call it lovemaking? Why don't you do this?" Then saying, like, "Well, I'm speaking to men and I'm trying to speak to men who are at a certain point. And I don't have any charge around that word. Neither do the women in my life. But I understand that you may." Right.
mm,
So just being public for, I've been on the internet for since 2009. That's a big education. That's a lot of unsolicited feedback from people on what I speak about and how I do.
mm,
And I've just become also, I think, more aware that because I don't personally have sexual trauma, I will always have a different view of sexuality than somebody who does. And most people do. A lot more men than we will ever acknowledge. And I would go out on a limb and say almost every woman. So there's just a bit more, yeah, maturity and sensitivity, right? My two teaching partners are brilliant therapists. So I've spent a lot of time with therapists over the past 5 years, listening to their stories, listening how they talk, listening to the words they choose and they don't choose. But to your point,
mm,
I think sex is under talked about. And I got away from it talking about it for a year or so. I was like, it's just
mm.
not where I think it's necessary. But I do, now we've come back to it because I think it is probably, especially with the way society is putting itself together, it's not happening. And so you do have a number of men who are suffering because they don't feel like that's available to them. And a lot of women who are suffering because that's the only thing men seem to be approaching them on. And the conversation culturally is shit. We're not
Yeah.
having honest conversations about sex,
Mm,
period. Right. I did a whole podcast episode this week on levels where I think people come into relationship and the sex that comes with that level.
mm,
And I've gotten incredible feedback on it because, oh, you're just naming it. Good. Let's call it out. Let's call it. Let's just speak about this. Is when I first got into this, Chris. I know I'm on a tangent now. I remember saying my job is just to talk about shit no one will talk about because I don't have shame around it. I don't have charge around it. One of the best compliments I ever get from both men and women is you make sex sound so normal. And I'm like, I think I think it actually is.
mm.
I don't think I think the culture has made it feel abnormal. But if it wasn't normal, like you got to realize we're not going to be here for much longer. Like it's sort of super necessary for the continuation of the species. That's base level, like root level, why we need it. And here's the potential of it. So let's talk about the whole pathway.
Mm.
because hiding shit, making it secret, keeping it in the shadow when it comes to both sex and money is why we have all of this acting out. It's why people gamble. It's why people look at porn. It's why people drink whenever their credit card bill comes. It's why sex addiction is where it's at. It's we aren't speaking about things honestly. So yeah, those are two big topics to me also because there's so much information in them. Do
Mm.
you want to know who you are at your deepest core? Cool. Tell me about your sex life and let me look at your credit card statement. I'll tell you, that'll tell me a lot. It'll tell me about your relationship to self-esteem, to self-worth, to power, to resources, right? Those are hugely informative topics that we've like tucked away in the taboo corner. No, no, no,
Yeah.
don't talk about that. But go take another ice bath and do ayahuasca 4 more times. That's how you'll heal your shit. No, no, no. Undo, look in the shadow. Everybody, all of us, myself included, because I had to. That's again, like, where did it come from?
Yeah.
Man, years ago, I had to peel the layers back on all my sexual shadows and what it was rooted to and what it was linked to. Same with money. Fuck. I'm running a company now. I have to know where the money is. I don't like that. That sounds like a lot of responsibility. Why am I not okay with responsibility?
Mm. But
You get how this works.
what was the root of that for you when you dived into your sexual
For
shadow?
money.
For
Oh,
money.
sex.
Yeah, sex.
I grew up in a house where being a man wasn't okay. Therefore, any extension of what it is to be a man, and I don't, no pun intended, is my sexuality. It's the deepest core of who I am as expressed through my sexuality, right? I also had kink inclinations. I was very dominant. I wanted to create scenes. I wanted to use rope. I wanted to have a power dynamic. And none of that was okay because that would actually imply that I wanted to be a powerful man. And I grew up in a home where that wasn't okay. So I had to actually look at my upbringing. I had to look at the fact that I was told, even telling a woman, hey, I want to pick you up at 7 is misogynistic. That makes me a bad person. That makes me a bad man. Like that's how intense my upbringing was. So can you imagine actually taking any kind of leadership role in sex? And then can you imagine taking that one level higher where it's not just a leadership role, it's a power dynamic? That's going to have me untangle all of this shame I have just about being a man because I grew up in an environment where being a man was not okay. It's shameful. You're the problem in the world. Well, then how am I going to fuck my partner to God if I'm ashamed of just even being a man?
Mm.
Right? That was just part of the road I had to go down.
Mm.
But the liberation on the other side was, you know why I wrote the book that I wrote was because I untangled myself from my sex life, from shame around it. I built a 7-figure company. I untangled my shame around my sexuality. Because how can you penetrate the world with an idea or a business if you've been told penetration on any level is toxic and misogynistic? You see the correlation there, or the energetic correlation? Right. I have I'm moving, Chris. So I'm moving houses. This right behind me there's 2 pieces of stuff on the walls. The branded poster behind me and a big plaque that says, fuck them with words, which is my writing motto. So you see how untangling from my sexuality let me write in a way that people go, man, I don't know. It really got deep in me. I'm like, I know. Do you see the words you just used? Right. Man, that just cut through all the bullshit. I've heard this stuff before, but somehow the way you wrote it, it got into me. I know. I fucked
Mm.
you with my words. So that's the stuff I've had to play with over the years. Where 10 years ago I was writing about, deadlifts and kettlebell swings and hoping I didn't upset anybody and just trying to make everybody happy with my writing because that's how I also was in the bedroom. hope I don't upset you by
Mm,
being here. Please let me just focus entirely on you and making you happy. I don't have needs. I don't have desires. I'm just a good guy, right? That's not how we get shit done in the world. That's not how you change the world. That's not how you help people.
mm.
That makes sense, that correlation.
Yeah, 100%. At the time, were you recognizing the power of if I transform this, if I lean into it? Did you recognize at the time that you would be able to use it as your superpower? Was there like, okay, you just wanted to get out of pain or that
I
it was
was really
causing destruction?
curious. I was curious why I felt ashamed from having desires that I did, like specific things, right? Um, I won't say who this is, but I had an ex partner years and years and years ago who I spanked, and she just sobbed and was like, "Why would you ever hit me? Why would you ever want to hit a woman?" And I was like, "Oh man, you're right. I'm terrible. Sorry. I'll never do that again. That was horrible." As opposed to saying, "Okay, sorry, the way I presented that wasn't right. I should have asked you and gone through a much different conversation. And it's actually
Mhm.
okay that that's a turn on for me. You're just not the right person." Instead, I hid it and was like, "We'll never do this again." And then what do you know? My porn use went through the roof. So I was conscious enough at the time, having understanding none of this, to go, huh, I was more interested in an internet sex life than an authentic real life sex life. I don't think that's sustainable or the highest level of being anybody, right? And I don't care if it's sex or otherwise. Whatever the topic is, if you're more interested in hiding it and keeping it online than you are living it out in person, to me, that just feels like a disconnect. So I didn't have it. It was such an interesting journey to go down, Chris, to be honest with you, where it wasn't guided, it wasn't taught. I didn't have a mentor. But the more I was just authentic and honest with my partners, of like, hey, this is something that I really like. And then for whatever reason, had the constellation where they could say back to me, cool, here's what I really like. And I would be like, okay, cool, let's try that, with no shame or shaming them or guilting them. Or, right. I had so many women in my life in this early part of exploration who would say, I brought the same thing to my past partner, and he told me I was a whore or a slut and I needed therapy and I was a broken woman. And I was like, that sounds terrible. Let's try it. Like, I don't think you're that. Like, I have some stuff that I'm into. You have some stuff that you're into. It sounds pretty normal. Let's try this. And then here was the juice. Afterwards, a week later, a month later, 6 months later, I would get messages from women saying, "Hey, thank you so much for that time we got to meet in the city and do that thing. I've started writing my book. I've left my job. I went back and had a hard conversation with my parents or with my ex." And I'd be like, "Really? Why are you telling me this? Like, what did it have to do with the fact that we got to like tie you up and have sex?" And they're like, "Well, you actually let me express a part of myself that's true without shaming me."
Mm,
And I go, "Oh, okay, there's way more here than just like this turns me on and makes me excited. There's something about authentic expression,
mhm,
being held and kept safe with someone, very vulnerable expression that previously has been shamed, that now has a place to live in the world. There's an after effect of that." And so I did start to put that together. Right. And I even would then leave those same encounters and be like, wait a minute. If I'm okay as a human being who I am expressing this with this woman, where else in my life could I be okay expressing myself fully with the right people and being celebrated for it? How would that change my life as a man? And so it wasn't direct. It wasn't like, wait, A plus B equals C.
mhm.
I fumbled for this for a long time, and it just took time. And I'll add one more point to that. I did have some extraordinary women in my life too, who would say things like, go even further, write even more aggressively, right? Like push this business, push this movement. Like you really need to hit men right in the head. Don't hold back. Be unapologetic about how you write, speak, fuck, live, all of it. I had people around me who were like, we want more and it's safe. We're not out of control here. We're not all high on drugs. We're
Mm,
like really conscious people. And that then translated even more to the bedroom. And then the bedroom translated even more to outside of it. Right. I have the quote, how you fuck your woman is how you fuck the world. And even when I wrote it, I don't think I understood the depth of it.
mhm. Did you
I hope
think,
this makes sense to people listening.
yeah, wow, it's making sense to me. Do you feel that had to come from a woman, and why? Like those kind of nudges and those, I guess, validation. And yeah, I think it's interesting to come from a woman, given that you said you were raised by household that, it wasn't okay to be a man. So maybe there's some like
Right. A
consolidation
hundred
there.
percent. 100%. It was beautiful validation, right? Thank you for being strong. Thank you for being upright. Thank you for being a leader. Thank you for being solid. Thank you for guiding me through that experience. Thank you for having the ability to hold me when I fell apart at the end in that experience. Thank you for being there for the aftermath of that experience where there was a big emotional release and not collapsing and not running away. Like that imprint of, oh, this is the potential of an aligned, integrated, powerful, open hearted, strong man early on before any of this was being put together. Right. I hadn't even written the book yet. It wasn't just like a thought in my mind.
Mm,
So very, very much so. But what it also highlighted, Chris, which think is why we're coming back now to actually working with women and having women in the movement, was you hearing from so many women, I've never had an energetic imprint of a strong, integrated, aligned, open hearted, caring man. I've been shamed. I've been put down. I've been hurt. I've been abused. I've been manipulated by men who aren't that. And so, if my goal in this life is to shift consciousness or shift people's experience or to end suffering, that man who gets to be that for that woman is one, he's going to feel amazing, but so is she. So this works in conjunction with each other. So I met all of these women who were starved for a man who to simply let them be who they were without shaming them, sexually or otherwise. And I met all these men who were saying, I'm shamed for simply being who I am. If I can show up this way, even if it doesn't benefit a woman, it will benefit me. And that was like a great starting point. But yeah,
mm,
the symbiosis of like, man, this was something that I was told would hurt women. Women are now telling me it's helping them. And it's not trauma bonding. It's not like, like, oh, you're fucked up and you've tapped into how I'm fucked up. And so now we can feel okay together, but it's not real.
mm,
It was, thank you for letting me be who I am,
mm. Yeah,
letting me express myself authentically.
and I'm tuning in for the need to recognize what your boundaries are within that. And if you don't know them, it's not safe to even express. Just go for it. If you don't
Yeah.
trust the other person that they have the boundaries in place. So it requires
100%
that.
on both sides, right?
Yeah.
On both sides. And if we're talking sex specifically, I definitely ran into women who were essentially saying, I just want you to hurt me. And I'd be like, not the right guy for you. I'm not interested in this kind of play, right? Go for one, please get some help. Like, I'm not interested in continuing to perpetuate your trauma. And I
Mm.
could see that from a mile away. And I can also see how that's very attractive to men who aren't fully through the process of healing themselves,
Yeah.
right?
Well, anything can be addictive.
For
Anything.
sure.
And you can be
Anything.
addicted. Well, we recognize it, don't we, in our in this time of how addicted we are to things that aren't healthy for us. Yeah. So it segues nicely into vulnerability, and I know it feels well really present at the moment for me. Around the conversation around is it okay to be vulnerable as a man to your partner? Let's stick with
Mm-hmm.
the dynamic, maybe.
Sure.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on it because I know you asked, was it Sarah on your recent podcast?
Mm-hmm.
But what is it for you? Because I know also Connor Beaton has a fair amount of work on this stuff around, you know, and you know what? You touched on it last time on our podcast when you said you go away to a weekend and you tap into parts of yourself and you feel more light and you've just lifted up emotion over your head. And then you go into any relationship or even someone down the street and you put that emotion on them, they're not going to be able to hold it. So there's never black and white. And I think
Mhm.
looking for the black and white is also a problem and can be an
Mhm.
addiction. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, yeah, around when you feel
I'm
it is okay to be vulnerable as a man.
going to be really conscious with this answer. There are women who cannot hold it. There are women who will do exactly what the cliche says. You will be left, you will be shamed, they will lose respect for you, they will lose desire for you, they will think that you're their child and they have to play mommy and they won't want to sleep with you, they will leave you for it. There is definitely a chunk of women who will do that to men. How do I know that? Because 99.9% of men I've ever talked to have that lived experience. I opened up to my girlfriend. She said she wanted vulnerability. She said she wanted me to just feel my emotions and see my tears. 2 weeks later, she called me a wimp. She packed her stuff and she left. Like that is a universal story. I don't have to hunt for that story. I don't have to interview 100 guys and get to like the 99th and be like, aha, finally it happened to one. It's the opposite. So it's a tough conversation, Chris, right? I still advocate it, but I advocate being vulnerable and sharing your depth with someone who's earned that vulnerability and earned that depth. Now that's a risk, right? You can say, wow, she did all the right things. She showed me her own vulnerability. We had little micro vulnerabilities that she could hold, but I cried and that was too much for her and she left. And I get that. I think the thing to speak to men is to say, this is the way I'm going to be in relationship. This is how I exist, Chris. I'm vulnerable in relationship. I have cried 50 times in front of my partner. I've had people die in my life. I've gone through hard shit. We've gone through hard shit. Never once have I had that put back on me. Never once. If it did, I would know that the relationship is over because I can't be with someone who would shame my emotion. Just like I wouldn't expect a woman to stay with me if I shamed her emotion and her vulnerability. But now, that being said, that's kind of like handing your partner an emotionally loaded gun and
Mm,
being like, hopefully they don't shoot you. And if in saying if they do, oh shit, sorry, man, just the wrong person. But you're like, wait a minute, I now have this hole in my chest where they blew me up. What do I do now? And so it really is a nuanced dynamic. It really is a double edged conversation. You will not get to the depth you want to get to without being vulnerable. Period. Fucking period. And the risk we all take, men and women, on the way down to that depth is the risk that that vulnerability will be used against us. That's where we're at culturally.
mm,
So I can say to guys, you got to be, the culture screams it. You got to be vulnerable. You got to be vulnerable. You got to be vulnerable. And there's 1,000 guys being like, we were, and we got left. Right. Yet I will propose a relational structure to you where you and your partner know each other better than anybody else on the planet, where you know your secrets, you know your foibles, you know your idiosyncrasies, you know your quirks, you know your fears, your shames, your hopes, your dreams. That is relating. That is what we are all dying for. Truly, that level of being known, being seen, being held, being met, being celebrated, like that's the fucking goal. The risk goes with it. The deeper you go, the higher the risk it is. Because that person now has ammunition to hurt you emotionally, egoically, spiritually, right? If they haven't done their work, if they're not clean, you're just handing the gun to like a criminal. And so it's a fucking risk, man. It's a fucking risk. I feel you. Like I have to check myself when I did a video on this a week ago and said to guys, I'm just going to propose this. I know a lot of you have been hurt by doing this. And here's how I do relationship. Take it or leave it. This is how I do it. So I'm not going to tell you to do it. I'm just going to present the model to you and present the structure and say, now, what you do with this is up to you. Who you do this with is up to you. I've done it with very conscious women, fortunately. I've done it with women who weren't conscious earlier in my life. Now I do it with conscious women. I also do it fully owning the risk that, hey, this could get thrown back in my face. So I hope I've answered your question. This is where the co-ed work is needed, Chris, because what we've done is we've pedestalized women and saying,
Yeah.
oh, they're the emotional ones. They can hold all the charge. They're the ones who are sensitive. No, 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 no. We are equally as fucking emotional and equally as sensitive. We've just been conditioned out of it. So now we have women who say, like, but I'm naturally able to hold a man in the depth of his emotion. And I'm like, bullshit, you are. You're still playing manipulative princess games or thinking you're a goddess because you went to a workshop. Have you gone to therapy? Have you untangled yourself from your shadow with the masculine? Right? That's the level we need to be playing at. Women need to do their work, men need to do our work, then we need to come together and do our combined work. That's how we have women who can hold men's emotions and men who can hold women's emotions and hold their depth, hold each of our depth.
Mm.
That's a tall order.
Yeah.
It's a tall order when we have a society that's drunk, high, politicians lying, systems that don't work, like all the bullshit of the civilized world. Consciousness is sitting over here in the corner being like, we'll just wait. You guys can keep fucking stuff up. But whenever it's our turn, we'd love an opportunity. Whenever you're done bombing innocent countries and killing children, yeah, we'd love to maybe like have a voice in this whole thing too.
Mm. Yeah, powerfully said. Uh, the greater the risk, the greater the reward. I
For
feel
sure.
it's easier for someone who's learning and tapping into this stuff who is not in a relationship and is about to be or is looking for, as you'd agree. It's obviously going to be way harder if you've got kids, if you're in a partnership with your business owners. But I think setting like some sort of milestones is important, like really setting some goals over the year together, or like inviting that in a little bit more and being really careful in that approach because you've hit the nail on the head. Like it's a big move, and arguably, yeah, it it can just cause a bit of chaos. But you know, whatever you settle for is really what you're going to perpetuate
Right.
more of, right?
Right.
So what you're willing to settle for, and it's not right or wrong, but if you're willing to settle for a certain standard, then it's just going to keep happening, right?
Yeah. And you have choice,
Hmm.
right? One thing I wish men knew about relationship is you have choice. You don't have to stay. You don't have to be in it. I think so many guys are just fingers crossed, like somebody liked me because I'm the pursuer as a person. I haven't spent my whole life with women throwing themselves at me at all. I've had to do the throwing. So, wow, one turned around and looked at me and said, I think you're kind of cute. I'll hang with you. My worldview is like, well, that's it. I can't leave this because what if there isn't another one out there? Where I tell so many guys, do you know you can leave? I'm not telling you to leave, but do you
Mm.
know you can hold a standard? You can raise the bar yourself and say, hey, this is no longer acceptable to me. Yesterday, I showed you vulnerability and emotion, and today you used it against me. I need you to know that won't happen again. You're
Yeah.
allowed to fuck up, just like I'm allowed to fuck up. But this is a no-go area We don't shame each other for our sexuality. We don't shame each other for our emotion. We don't shame each other for our vulnerability. This is how I will be in relationship with or without you. And I think if it's said heartfelt and heart open, where it's not just a
Mm.
boom ultimatum, it's like no other, it's like every other deal breaker, right?
Yeah.
If I caught my girlfriend stealing money out of my wallet, I'd be like, what's going on here?
Mm.
Uh, that's not okay with me. Just like if she shamed my vulnerability.
Absolutely. I think I'd like to throw in a caveat of I'd like to know your thoughts. So when you start to do things differently and it's a year into the relationship, or someone
Mm,
changes, someone starts reading self-development books and tapping into this stuff, and then they start to change. The question I ask is, when you got together with this person, how was it? And what was the first few months like? And did you share anything then? And if this is a new thing, then the accountability piece is so important because they've not changed, but you have. But yet your
mhm,
standards are higher, and you're expressing, but your expectations are more as well. So there's this like, yes, all of that is true, but are you taking complete ownership of it because you're the one that's wanting more?
for sure.
Yeah.
And there's this is the nature of relationship. We grow at different levels, we grow at different speeds. And again, if we come back to choice, you're allowed to grow ahead of your partner and say, "Hey,
Mm.
guess what? I've
Yeah.
grown and I love you and I want to stay with you and I want to build with you. And here's what I need from now on." And now you have a choice. Is this still a partnership that you want to be in? And what happens so often, Chris, is men are the ones who are told, "Hey, I've grown. Hey, I want more. Hey, we've raised the bar and this is the expectation now." And most guys are going like, "Wait a minute, fuck. Why isn't it the way we were? We got together at 23,
Mm.
we went out partying every night. Here we are at 35. Why don't you still want to do that?" But the opportunity is also for those men to go, guess what? You're right. I'm going to grow with you.
Mm.
And if I grow more than you do, I'm going to invite you up with me. But you both have choice. I know, unfortunately, a lot of relationships where one person quits drinking and the other one then leaves, where the opportunity is you can quit drinking too. Like, what's unattractive about growth? What's unattractive about more connectivity? I'll tell you, it's called change.
Mm.
And change is scary. And change is confronting. And change is evolutionarily confronting and scary.
Mm.
But I
The
see it all the time, man.
the perception of
I,
what that means as well. It, the perception of the you're not fun anymore.
yeah.
The perception of the things that you think are going to happen, and you're just, you- I guess, what's what's the word? Catastrophizing the future of what it means when this person stopped drinking.
It's what requires constantly in relationship to me is renegotiation.
Mm.
Because you're not 22 anymore, right? I'm I'm considerably different than when I got together with my partner at 44. And that's not talking like 20 to 40 or 25 to 35, like these huge milestone age changes. 44 to 48 radically changed me because three of the closest people in my life died, because my business went from here to here, because I lived through a pandemic. I'm different. I'm going to keep growing at that pace. Now, here's the invitation. You can come with me. But what has to happen is we sit down and say, "Hey, I know when we got together in the beginning, it was just all about fun and laughter and our friends and sex and adventure. And I feel like I'm in a different stage now. Do you want to come meet me in this stage and be with me in this stage? And if you don't, that's okay." But I think we look at relationship, unfortunately, as this static entity. And guys specifically, we get a little more stuck. I'm like, why aren't we living the way we were, 8 years ago? Because we've grown, we've changed, things have changed. And it's hurtful and painful for those guys to hear, "Hey, you need to use this, you get to use this relationship as a vehicle for growth and transformation. Because I got to say this, a lot of women are oriented that way. A lot of men are oriented towards let's keep things exactly the way they are. We're a bit more slow. We're a bit more static. If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Mm. Why do you think that
But
is
I
that
will also
women are
go ahead.
oriented for change?
Why is that?
Mm.
I think they're just more in touch with one with cycles, right? Like their energy, they go through a death and rebirth every month.
Hmm.
They go through an entire cycle every single month. We go through one every 8 years, if that. So I think they're just more oriented towards that. They're also more inner focused. We're more outer focused. So we're like, hey, I'm the same dude, but my job has changed 5 times in the last 8 years. Like there's change. Where
Hmm.
women may say, like, yeah, but who I am as a person has changed radically in the last 8 years. Are you still able to meet me? And really, Chris, it comes back to, the very first time I met Dewey Freeman, my mentor, the therapist. He brought me up to meet his horses and said, horses need to know two things. Are they safe? Where do they fit in the pack? That's us. Am I still safe in this relationship with you? And where do I fit in this relationship with you? In a constantly shifting dynamic over the course of years or decades or big milestone life changes, having kids, having people die, having businesses flourish, having businesses end, physical changes in our bodies, in our growth and development, hormonal changes. I think it's a great conversation
Mm.
every month. Do you still feel safe? Do you know where you fit in? For both people, right?
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
really asking, like, it may appear not to be broke, but does it need to shift? And that sneaks up on a lot of dudes. This is why I teach this to men.
Yeah.
So many men suffer because they've lost a relationship. So many men kill themselves at the end of a breakup. So many. And yet, if we go back and say, hey, did you think of this thing as it was going to be the same forever? They'll be like, yeah, that was the contract I signed at 23, right?
Yeah.
But no, that's not the contract you signed. You guys signed two different contracts.
Mm.
You just didn't talk about it.
Do you think that feeds into the suicidal situation we're in? And there was something you shared on your page, which was, I think it was Healthy Gamer on Diary CEO, talking about 50%. There's a study that says 50% of male suicides show no sign of like previous mental illness. And
Yeah.
it's just the most rational option in the moment. And is there something in that that we think it's going to stay the same so much because we're craving that?
My interpretation of that video and my interpretation of the facts underneath it are a lot of men will get crushed by a changing life circumstance who simply don't have, it's not
Mm.
systemic depression, it's not systemic anxiety or suicidal ideation. It's this sucks and I don't know a way out of it. I can't see a way out of it. Right. And so what I say to that, it's why I wrote my first book of like, this sucks. What are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with all this fucking pain? How are
Mm.
you going to use it? How are you going to use it to change your life circumstance? It was why originally Uncivilized was that. My first clients, Chris, were like, you're now going to go get a gym membership. I'm going to strength train you. We're going to talk about your money. You're not going to be looking at porn. You can't do the things you were doing to make you ignore how unhappy you were in your life circumstance. We're going to go after your life circumstance. And so I know for a lot of guys too, we aren't as flowy, for lack of a better term. We're more rigid, and so we're less comfortable with the unknown. Where I think feminine energy, women, because there's so much constant change with them, because they are more like, I'll just say, like, all over the place emotionally, energetically, they're okay with change. It happens to them all the time. where
Yeah.
we come to a conclusion, a closing of a relationship, and we think, I don't know how to handle this. This is it. I don't know if I'll ever get another one of these. There's also that too, right?
Mm.
If you have spent your life being pursued and you leave a relationship, your brain's like, cool, I'll just go get pursued again. This isn't going to be that hard. I just have to throw a picture up on Instagram and I have 50 dudes in my DMs. Where that dude is like, wait a minute, it took me 7 years of going to the bars, of trying on dating apps, of having first dates that failed, of being set up by my friend's cousins.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
then I met Susan. Now Susan's gone. I don't have another 7 years. I don't want to do this. Right.
Yeah.
And then if we add in the second point of most guys don't have a robust support system, most guys don't.
Mm.
I just shared with you my father passed like a month ago. I will get 3 or 4 messages a day, a month later, from guys. Be like, hey man, just checking in on you. Hey man, just checking in on you. Hey man, you want to go hiking this weekend? A month later, multiple. I don't recognize that as normal. Right. And again, I'm in a unique position running a men's movement. So I do have a lot of people around me. But most guys, it's like, boom, I got to deal with this on my own.
Mm.
Or they have a toxic support system. Cool, let's take you out and get you drunk. Let's just tell you to get over it. Let's try to get you laid again,
Mm.
as opposed to dealing with the raw hurt and
Yeah.
devastation and emotion, right?
Symptom relief.
Exactly.
It's just, yeah. It's the
Right. No guidance. There's
Mm.
not a mentorship. There's not someone. I was so fortunate when my marriage ended that a man who's now an elder in the Uncivilized Nation, a guy named Mark Sylvester, he's in his 70s. His wife was like, you got to go talk to him. Didn't know him, never met him. And for months, he would take me on walks. I'd be like, you're going to be okay. Trust me. He was on his fourth marriage. He's like, trust me, there's more out there, right? There's a couple more options here. Where I was like, no, this is it. That was my one shot. I'm done with women. I'm done with family. He's like, you're 39 years old. Trust me. But what if I didn't have him?
Yeah.
And my friends were like, cool, let's go get blackout drunk tonight.
Mm.
And I have a gun in my house. And she's the only woman I've ever dated in the last 4 years. And I'm so lonely. And I haven't gone to therapy. So I actually think that my parents telling me I'm a worthless piece of shit is true anyway. Now you take that recipe and you put it together. And I'm surprised we don't have more suicides. I'm sorry to say that. I hope they stop completely.
Mm.
Man, from what I've seen on the very small in scope and size social media following I have, of how many guys have said, like, I don't want to be here anymore. This is going to be me. I don't know. I'm tired of this game. I'm done with it. It's like such an epidemic. Sorry, epidemic lack of support and an epidemic lack of belief that things will get better and things can get better.
Mm.
That it just breaks my heart, man. It just breaks my heart. I put a video up of it was a guy from England giving out free hugs. And it was just to dudes. And how many guys in there were like, I'm going to kill myself? And they're talking on a public forum to someone they don't know. Like, is it just because that's the only safe place to do it? Or is it because literally there's no one else in their life they can go to and say, man, I'm not doing okay right now?
Mm.
It begs the question.
Mm. What's your advice for other men's organizations out there? Because from what I see, there's a lot of high ticket options to come to events, to come to retreats.
Sure.
That's the majority, because it's the age of the retreat. And yes, they're incredibly powerful, but the sustainability is not what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
So like creating a platform, I mean, you inspired me to create my own, and it's pay what you feel model, and it's all encompassing, and what to tap into this stuff a little bit more, and to to create those networks? I mean, you're doing it, but like if there was something you could, yeah, create some more awareness about for other men's groups, what would that be?
It's not a business,
Hmm.
right? Like it requires a business. I think one of the hardest things I've had to navigate, which is why we created a nonprofit, is I was creating a movement and a business at the same time. And the movement was cool. 1,000 guys got together this weekend all over the planet for free and talked about their feelings. Incredible. We've done so much good. We've saved hundreds of lives just this weekend. Now, how do we pay for some shit? Like, we got a website, we have insurance, we have such and such. We have like, how do we support this?
Mm.
And remember why you started.
Yeah.
And you did it to help men. And
Mm.
I get it. This requires money. It requires a business. Um, but don't forget why you got into it.
Hmm.
We have never, even before we had a nonprofit, Chris, we never turned someone down for money. I was like, here's the deal. If you ever call me or email me, I'm like, hey, I'd love to join this thing. I literally don't have $30 a month. We'd be like, cool, get in here. We're not retiring on your $30. And we'd rather have you get support, help, presence, get in here, right? And we were very fortunate too that we had so many generous men. This is the beauty too, right?
Mm.
I had guys that would have come to 5 workshops, and every single time they just bought 2 tickets, and they'd be like, "Give one to somebody else, give one to somebody else, give one to somebody else." Or guys who came to one. We've had 2 members who came to one workshop and said, "Every single time you do this, I'll sponsor somebody." This is a $4,000 workshop, right? Every single time. I'm not even coming. Just sign me up for the rest of the time you guys do this. And we have high ticket stuff, right? So it's like, don't forget why you started.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
think that's the thing I would say. I see a lot of men's organizations where I'm like, man, you're just doing this for the wrong reasons. I'm not talking shit on anybody specifically, but I
Mm.
can definitely tell who's just trying to make a buck on it and who's actually in it for the long run, right? Like, do you want to be helping men for the next 20 years, 30 years,
Yeah.
50 years? Long. This is going to be going, this is like, I'm not trying to just plug a nonprofit, but it is going to outlive me. And it's going to outlive me if I decide this isn't what I want to do 3 years from now.
Mm.
That entity will continue to help men forever.
Mm.
Fuck yeah. Goal achieved, right? That's why I got into this, to build the movement of 1 million men who express their masculinity through the primal and divine. Not to have a Ferrari, not to have 7 houses, not to have a helicopter. Do I want all those things? Sure. Do I want all those things at the expense of helping more and more people? No. I want to look back on my career and what I built and go, man, we did it. We helped, we shifted the global thought on masculinity.
Mhm.
Cool. Hopefully I'm doing that, taking a helicopter to a surf spot in Tahiti in my 70s. If I'm riding a train, doing it somewhere in Goa, even fuck it, I don't care. Let's just, like, what are you doing here, fellas? You know?
Yeah, yeah, beautifully said, man. Um, okay, so lastly, let's change lanes a little bit. The book that you've just written,
Yeah.
how's this weaving into all of your work? And when's it out? September, I feel.
It comes out for pre-order October 15th.
Okay.
It's called 28 Days in Darkness. And it's about my month in the dark, about that
Mm.
dark retreat. And it is about how people can navigate the dark times of their lives. It's how people can, look at my arm. Woof, got chills. Navigate their shadows, deal with rock bottom, deal with a changing culture, deal with uncertainty, deal with divorce. It's a guidebook for navigating the shit that no one wants to talk about. I'm not a fan of love and light is the only answers. There are 2 answers, But I feel like our culture and our society specifically are terrified of things that we don't want to talk about: challenge, pain, hurt, depression, upset. So how does it weave into my work? I'm my knock on wood, it comes out specifically in February. And then, Chris, I go back into the dark for 7 more weeks. So I'm hoping to use this whole year as like a feeding ground, training ground, initiation personally of, I've been through a bunch of shit in the past couple of weeks that prepares me to then come out next July and say, hey, men, I'm not just talking to you anymore, but hey, humans, there's work we need to do. I have an organization that's already built, that already has people, has structure, has workshops, has courses, has infrastructure. Now let's talk to the masses about challenges, about darkness, about the places you hide shit, about the parts of yourself you're not comfortable with, right? About rock bottom. And I feel like it's my entryway back into the collective. I wrote a book on divorce. If you're not divorced, you're not interested in that. I wrote a book for men. If you're not in this movement or this idea, you may not be interested in that. This is a mass appeal book.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go from the depths of despair to the joy of awakening? You don't get to do that without going neck deep in some shit and some dark parts. So that's the idea with that book.
Mm. Thanks, man. I'm sure there's so much you can say on that.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, it's a huge one, right? We just don't have it. We don't have darkness, and
yeah.
we used to, and that's come at a cost. It's come at a
Right.
cost in our own minds, and it's such a metaphor for the times that we live in. Everything's illuminated, everything's shiny.
And it's falling apart in front of our eyes.
It's so true. Yeah,
Right.
we can see more, right? We can see more of the falling apart.
Right.
Mm. Do you do sweat lodges where you are?
I have done them.
Hmm.
I did one 3 months ago. Yeah. In
Mm.
Boulder. Good buddy of mine, Darren Silver, put it on. Really fascinating dude. And
Hmm.
I'll tell you, one of the things I love about the most is how dark they are.
Yeah.
That cover comes down and I just am like, oh, I'm back home. Welcome home.
Yeah.
Sit in the darkness. Yeah.
I've done like five in a year now, and the first one, so scared of the dark. Like it was
Yeah.
such a big thing. Second, it was beautiful. Just
Right.
enjoyed the
Right.
darkness more than anything. Everything's if there was light, it would be a distraction.
Yeah.
It was like a real just calling in of my own stuff. It was yeah, I get so much from them.
I love that sentence. If there was light, it would have been a distraction. Right?
Yeah.
You get it. The first time it's scary.
Mm.
The second time it feels like home. That's why I'm going back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll tell you this right now. I don't think I've told anybody except I've like dropped it to my team. I want to do for a book launch event. I want to have people spend an entire hour fully
Not an hour,
blindfolded.
surely.
An
Just turn the
hour.
lights off before and after.
Nope. Nope. I want them to sit there while I read parts of the book. I want to feed them something so they have to eat
Wow.
in the dark. I want them to have to interact a little bit in the dark. Man,
Yeah.
I've got this huge party planned for February where someone's gonna get up and storm out in the middle.
They'll try.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a restaurant in London actually that's a darkness restaurant, and have
Yeah.
you heard about that? Yeah, I've not been.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's an
low
adventure.
hanging fruit, right? Really.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say?
That was it. Just I'm just
Yeah.
excited that I want to bring darkness back into our culture with a different understanding
Mm,
because we're not holistic right now. We don't deal with root causes. We don't talk about shit that's uncomfortable. We don't talk about shame. We don't talk about guilt. We don't talk about the truth. The truth is right in front of our eyes and we just skip past it and pretend that it's not there. And I don't know about the UK, but we're falling apart here in the US.
mm,
We're sicker than we've ever been before. We're broker than we've ever been before. We're not in relationships. We're not having sex. We don't know our neighbors. We're not happy. The collective has a cloud over it that we are pretending doesn't exist. I'm like, oh, wow, it's super sunny. It's not, because we won't look into our own truth, the dark parts of our being, the shit that's happened to us that we're still carrying the darkness of, as opposed to having a relationship with it and therefore alchemizing it. We're not doing that. We're just
Mm.
fucking pretending. I'm done pretending.
Yeah. And it's these experiences that we're lacking, these tools and these certain ways of just tapping into this stuff. And it could, in a few generations, it could look so different if a child was initiated into some sort of darkness or had to face some stuff, or had to go through some situation to initiate, this is what you're doing with older men. It's, you know,
Mm,
yeah, we could touch upon that, but around the youth and what how that feeds into your work.
yeah.
If you want to speak to that, you can, but I think let's wrap it up. And yeah, just appreciate
Yeah.
you, brother. Appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time and all that you're speaking to. It resonates deeply. And yeah,
Thank you.
forever an inspiration, man.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.